Welcome to the Clearground Show. I'm your host, Dr. G, with a PhD. We've got a lot of stories for you guys today. We're going to start off with looking at Justin Trudeau from the past, and then more to the present, and we'll see what Quebec is doing also in Canada. From there, we're going to go to Australia. Australia's back in the news. They can't ever be out for too long. They've got to up their crazy, and in spectacular fashion, they do that this week. Then we're going to take a look at SCOTUS. So remember, the Supreme Court was hearing oral arguments against Joe Biden's mandates yesterday, Friday. So we're going to take a look at those and go over some of them. I'll talk about an Omicron study that came out in Ontario, Canada. Then I'll talk about a new Omicron symptom that isn't being discussed too much, but it's prevalent, and I'll let you guys know what that is. From there, we're going to discuss a FDA letter of authorization for using Moderna as a booster. And I think you guys are going to be quite shocked at what you find about their reasoning. We'll also look at an FDA video recommending boosters in general. And after that video, I have a feeling everyone's going to say, wait a minute, this is the science? This is the science that they're using? Yes, it is. And with that, let's dive on in. Before we get into anything too serious, I wanted to show you guys this video from ABC, and it's of a bunch of sheep that are being, not herded, I guess herded. They use food on the floor in the shape of a syringe to get the sheep to form a syringe shape. And this was in an effort to get more Germans vaccinated. It was a promotion. I think the irony was lost on them about using sheep to promote getting the COVID vaccine or COVID boosters. But unlike these people, I'm not going to tell you what to think. I don't think you're sheep. But you guys let me know what you think about this video in the comments. Use your own free will and prudential judgment. There are no wrong answers, of course, so this is an open lobby. Talk about whatever you want. Now let's go to some actual stories. Let's take a brief trip down memory lane and take a look at what Justin Trudeau had to say just a few months ago.
But like I said, what do you do with someone with an allergy? What do you do with someone who's immunocompromised, or someone who, for religious or deep convictions, decides that no, they're not going to get a vaccine? We're not a country.
What do you do?
We're not a country that makes vaccination mandatory, for example, but we want to encourage everyone to get it.
Now here he is again on September of 2021.
You deserve better. You deserve a government that's going to continue to say, get vaccinated. And you know what? If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't think you can get on a plane or a train besides vaccinated people and put them at risk.
That was pretty fast from, there's exceptions and people don't have to get it. We recommend they get it, but, everyone's their own person, and we're not going to force people to. If you don't get the vaccine, you think you can travel? Think you go on a train? Of course you can't, because we have to protect the vaccinated people, which is hilarious because, as you know, you get the vaccine to protect yourself. So this just shows part of the downfall of Western civilization in terms of, this medical fear of COVID. I'm not saying COVID isn't scary. Lots of diseases are scary. I'm saying we knew a lot and still know a lot about COVID, who it targets, who the primary people that get sick are. We know a lot of data about COVID, and they're still peddling out this exact kind of message. How do we know that? Let's take a look at Quebec and what they're saying about boosters.
Are we going to have a time where the vaccine passport requires a fourth dose and a fifth dose and a sixth dose?
Well, let's start with the third dose first. I think it's very clear that given what's happening now, and will there be another Omicron version, whatever, in April or May, I don't know. But we have put this tool in place. It has worked from last summer to a couple of weeks ago before we got hit by this tsunami. And we're going to be ready to use this passport over the next year or so. And that's the reason I'm warning people today that the third dose will be adjusted for the passport. And
so just like Israel, Canada's planning on adding the booster to the passport thing. One of my favorite parts of that video is when he goes Omicron or whatever that thing is, that silly little thing, Omicron. Well, what's interesting about all the things that he's saying is that their strategy worked until it didn't. And then what's the plan? To double back down on the strategy that just was proven to have not worked in this case. And so I don't really see the logic, and I think a lot of people don't see the logic, and a lot of people are pushing back on these sort of policies. Speaking of crazy policies, now it's been a hot minute since we've gone to our friends in Australia, but they have made their way back into the news cycle this week in some truly extravagant and crazy COVID policies. Let's take a listen right now.
I will now go through each of these decisions. First, the lockout. The fully vaccinated can continue as they were. For people who are not vaccinated, lockdown rules will apply to everyone 16 and above. If you are not fully vaxxed, stay home. You are at greater risk of catching COVID, becoming ill, and needing hospital care. You may only leave home for 3 reasons. Medical treatment, including COVID testing or vaccination. For essential goods and services like groceries, power tokens, medications. To provide care and support to a family member or person who cannot support themselves. You cannot travel more than 30 kilometres from your home when leaving for one of the 3 reasons, or the nearest practical destination. If you need to go to the hospital and it's more than 30 kilometres from your home, that's okay. There are only 3 reasons to leave the home now, not 5. Work is not a reason to leave the home for the unvaccinated. The Chief Health Officer has also determined that restriction of movement is critical right now and that 1 hour of exercise for the next 4 days is not essential. Remember, these restrictions only apply to those who are not fully vaccinated.
So first of all, you're allowed to go to a hospital if it's outside of 30 kilometers. Why 30 kilometers? I have no idea where that comes from. But as long as you're going to a hospital outside of it, fine. Everything else, you are not allowed to leave that 30-kilometer radius. It's also interesting that they banned exercise outdoors for people who aren't vaccinated in a disease that primarily makes super sick the overweight and obese. So that's a great policy. It doesn't stop there. Australia was holding the Australia Open this past week, and they should rename it to the Australia Closed because they started banning a bunch of players that didn't have the vaccine papers or requirements in terms of vaccination to go into the country. So, for example, the tennis star Novak Djokovic, who had a vaccine exemption from 2 doctors, entered Australia. He's the #1 tennis player. He entered to play. They put him in a holding room for like 8 hours or 6 hours and then just decided to not let him play. So Australia is really doing yeoman's work here in the COVID front, and they just keep getting more and more crazy. I have no idea why. I really wish they would show some science, some evidence-based reason for what they're doing. I fear they can't, and that's why they aren't showing it. Moving over from that crazy scene, let's go to a crazy scene in America, and that is the Supreme Court hears oral arguments against the Biden mandates, specifically regarding OSHA and the CMS mandates. I'm going to play a couple of clips and then I'm going to read a couple of statements because that goes by a little faster. So first, let's hear what Justice Sotomayor had to say on children in hospitals.
Country today than we had a year ago in January. We have hospitals that are almost at full capacity with people severely ill on ventilators. We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators. So saying it's a different variant.
Before going to Gorsuch, the level of illiteracy in some of the statements that I'm going to read to you coming up, and then what Justice Sotomayor just said, is so high that I would really have expected the Supreme Court justices to at least have Googled things before hearing the arguments. Now, Justice Gorsuch actually brings it to a legal question instead of talking about some of the medical outcomes of COVID. Let's hear what he has to say on how the executive branch has acted in lieu of Congress.
Congress has had a year to act on the question of vaccine mandates already. As the Chief Justice points out, it appears that the federal government is going agency by agency as a workaround to its inability to get Congress to act.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point. It's fair. I think that's a lot more what the Supreme Court's there for, to discuss legal matters versus scientific ones. And as we'll see in a minute here, they do not know a lot of the science behind COVID. But one clip I want to play real quick that's making the rounds is they're saying Justice Breyer said there's 750 million cases just last week. He did say that, but in context, I think that was a slip of the tongue. Because he before and after was mentioning 750,000 cases. So that's just to be fair to Justice Breyer. Let me play that clip for you guys real quick.
But my question really is, what I'd like to turn this to, is state. You heard what I asked. I mean, 750 million new cases yesterday, or close to that, is a lot. I don't mean to be facetious. But that's why I said...
Yeah, extending fairness all around, that was a slip of the tongue. He did not actually mean, I don't think, 750 million new cases. Now, things that weren't slips of the tongue that I think are just egregious. So Justice Breyer said that vaccine mandates could prevent 100% of cases in the U.S. Totally wrong. That's misinformation. I mean, my own show, I think, got pulled from YouTube for a little bit because we were just quoting Rachel Maddow saying that. So that's wrong. Justice Sotomayor said that COVID deaths are at an all-time high. Also incorrect. Justice Kagan said that it is beyond settled that vaccines and masks are the best way to stop the spread. Obviously, she has not been watching the news in the last few weeks. Justice Sotomayor, again, said that the federal government can mandate vaccines using its police power. I'm not sure about that. Justice Sotomayor said that Omicron is deadlier than Delta. Clearly not the case. We're actually going to break down a study for that later in this episode. Definitely not the case. So Sotomayor also asked, and I think this is just the most telling statement of our time in terms of COVID. She said, how are humans different from machines? And she was saying this in relation to like how we spread COVID and should we treat it like a machine in that we're producing these COVID virions and spreading them. It was a really crazy statement. Justice Barrett asked a good question. So she said, where does the emergency end? And given that the virus may be endemic, why can the agency bypass notice and comment, which gives people the voice that they're entitled to in a democracy? I think that's a great question. When does the emergency end? Justice Alito said, are there any OSHA regulations that require employees to do something that involves some risk to them? Also a great question. So basically what he's saying is there is some risk, especially depending on age, of getting the vaccine versus the risk of getting COVID. So if OSHA is going to mandate something like this, does OSHA have a history of mandating things that carry with them potential risks? I don't know. I think it's a good question, though. These oral arguments, these are just the oral arguments. So the Supreme Court's not going to make any decisions until I believe summer of 2022. So we've got a while to go before that happens. But my opinion, though, on all this science misinformation that was just spouted at the Supreme Court from the justices is that really they're in the business of law. Does the government have the right to do this for CMS? Does OSHA have the right to mandate this for employees? That's what's important. Obviously, these people aren't scientists. Now, it bothers me a little that they didn't even bother to Google things. Just a 5-minute Google search, and they would have known what they were saying is bunk. That bothers me, but that doesn't bother me nearly as much as the fact that this needs to be focused on law. And the distinction between science and law, because people are going to start saying, well, hey, no, you need the science to make the law. The difference is this. The science, whatever the science may be, the doctors, the scientists, whatever, they can tell you the risk. They can give you a hard percentage. They can't tell you if that risk is worth it or not, or if it's legal or not. That's a totally different matter. And right now we're discussing the legality. We're not discussing the risk. Even if the risk was, it's 5% chance of death, which is very high. I'm not entirely sure if that risk translates to law. I don't know if there's a law that says, well, look, if you have an X% risk of transmission or death, then this law kicks in and says, okay, we can do all these things. I don't know about that. And I don't think that's the case. And that's what this whole decision is going to be about. The legality, not exactly the science. Now, speaking of the deadliness of Omicron as related to Sotomayor's statements, first let's take a look at this study from Canada. And it's Ontario, and the title is Early Estimates of SARS-CoV-2 Omicron Variant Severity Based on a Matched Cohort Study. Like everything, the link is in the description, so if you guys want to go read it, it's a fast read and it's pretty interesting. So I'm going to put the abstract up here. Now from the abstract, I want to highlight one section, and that is this. There were 59 0.51% hospitalizations and 0.03% deaths among matched Omicron cases, compared to 221, which is 1.6% of hospitalizations, and 17, which is 0.12% deaths among matched Delta cases. the risk of hospitalization or death was 65% lower among Omicron cases compared to Delta cases, while risk of intensive care unit admission or death was 83% lower in Omicron cases versus Delta cases. So 83% is no small difference. That's huge. So I'm going to show a figure here that they put, and this just shows Delta versus Omicron on a graph, and you have the percentage of hospitalization or death on the y-axis, and then you have the days of onset on the x-axis. And you can see here that Omicron is significantly below Delta, but you can also see that both of them are well below the 5% level for hospitalization or death. And now here's the table, and this table just shows, it breaks down their Delta cases, Omicron cases, hospitalization, ICU or death, and hospitalization or death. And I just put this up here to show you that, again, it's very, very age striated. You can see the cases in terms of age, you can see the deaths in terms of age. So just, a nice visual. Again, it's in the description, so go ahead and read it if you guys are interested. While we're on the topic of Omicron, I want to bring you guys' attention to a unique symptom that specifically seems to be happening with Omicron, just so you guys know. This comes from Fortune magazine. As COVID-19 infections continue to escalate into the new year, some patients have been reporting a strange new symptom, and that is night sweats. These are commonly associated with other conditions like the flu, anxiety, or even cancer. Night sweats were less commonly associated with COVID before the Omicron variant began to rapidly spread worldwide. They are repeated episodes of extreme perspiration that can soak your clothes and sheets, according to the Mayo Clinic. Night sweats are one of a few distinct symptoms that appear to separate Omicron from other COVID variants, along with a sore throat. And unlike Delta and the original COVID strain that first hit the US, Omicron does not seem to be associated with a loss of taste and smell. This is from Dr. John Torres, NBC, new senior medical correspondent, said on the Today Show that the night sweats are a, quote, very strange symptom, quote. Dr. Amir Khan of the United Kingdom's National Health Service also said to look out for night sweats as they sign to get tested for COVID-19. Just a new symptom to look out for in case any of you guys come down with it. But let's move on to some interesting information on the FDA and Moderna. So this paragraph comes from the Emergency Use Authorization Letter of Authorization. Again, the letter and all the updates to all the other letters for authorization are posted in the links. So if you want to check it out, go ahead. So here's what it says. For the January 7th, 2022 authorization revising the authorized dosing interval of the homologous booster dose to at least 5 months after completion of the primary series, the FDA reviewed pre-publications, accepted publications, published publications, and real-world evidence on the safety of booster doses provided by the Israeli Ministry of Health, which includes data from approximately 4.1 million booster doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine given to individuals 16 years of age and older at least 5 months after the primary series, and which did not raise new safety concerns associated with the booster dose. Although the overall composition of the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine is different than the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, both are mRNA vaccines with safety and efficacy profiles that, though not identical, are relatively similar. Acknowledging the differences, it is reasonable to make the inference that the safety data on the 5-month interval for booster doses obtained in the population in Israel can apply to the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine based on the totality of the scientific evidence. This is absolutely insane. So what are they saying? They're saying, well, these two drugs, they're pretty similar. They're both mRNA vaccines. Oh, okay. Well, I guess if we just do studies on one, and by the way, these aren't even studies. These are like observations from Israel. If we just observe what they're doing and we look at their observational data, then yeah, we can go ahead and assume that this Moderna vaccine is equal in safety, and let's just go ahead and recommend it for booster dosing. That is insane. What's even more insane is this doctor from the FDA comes on and says as much in this commercial.
People who had COVID-19 early on in the pandemic had a different variety, a different variant of COVID-19 than what's circulating right now. And we know that you need high levels of immunity, such as those that would be provided by a booster. So if you've been vaccinated and have also had COVID-19, it's probably also a good idea to get a booster. And in that case, you should talk to your healthcare provider and ask them when the time is right for you to get that booster. But getting that booster can help prevent you from getting into further trouble with a new variant down the line. So consider talking to your healthcare provider about getting a booster.
So a couple of points. Number one, when he talks about the old variants, so if I've had COVID in the past and it was the original COVID, that's a different strain than the Omicron strain. True. Now, what's the issue with this? Well, the booster is the same same formulation as the original COVID-19 vaccine, right? So that was also for the original variant. So it's unclear to me why he's comparing the two when, if you want to, for example, when you get the flu vaccine, you get that for the next year's potential viruses. You don't keep getting the same flu vaccine every year for new strains. This is the same idea. It's the original COVID strain. That's what this vaccine is for. Now, there is evidence of, antibodies going up and what that confers to sickness or not. I'm not entirely sure, especially with Omicron. And we can talk about that data. But the fact that he just throws out the variance thing is really weird to me. I think the best thing he says is go talk to your doctor. Yes, go talk to your healthcare providers. Discuss what you know. Discuss what they know. Figure out a plan that works best for you. I guarantee you, the boosters are not for everyone. Guarantee you. If they're for you, great. If they're not, great. Time really flies when I'm making these. So on Monday, I got some stories that I didn't get to today that I want to get to. And those include an LA public health statement about masking, New York cases, and that's going to be cases in the hospital with COVID versus from COVID. We'll talk about Harris County in Texas versus Greg Abbott and how they just won a court case. Then we'll talk about Whoopi Goldberg gets COVID and what she has to say on it. And then I'm going to make a case for less testing in general. That's not to say no testing, but there's some prudence that we should include in our testing regimen, similar to masking, similar to everything else I've said. There's a reasonableness that we're not really doing with testing right now, and I think we should do, and I'll make that case on Monday. And with that, that's the end of our episode. Now, anecdotally, guys, a lot of my friends have come down with COVID. A lot of my family has come down with COVID this past week, and that's both vaccinated and unvaccinated alike. So if you guys are sick, please take care of yourselves, and I hope you feel better soon. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like and please share, and let's have your friends subscribe. Let's get more reasonable conversation out there. If you like the video thumbnails, they're all in high quality and bigger versions of themselves on the Instagram. Check out the Instagram if you guys want to see those. So please enjoy this Great Escape Penguin video, and I'll catch you guys on Monday.
Uh-oh. Oh, shit. Oh, no. I got split. Run. Run, you're gonna make it. Oh, he made it.